At 6:47 a.m., a man named Ethan Cole pushed open the doors of St. Mercy Church. He wasn't there for miracles or redemption. He was just tired. Life had taken too much from him. His job, his home, his faith. But that morning, for some reason, he came to pray. He lit a candle near the altar. The flame flickered weakly, like it didn't want to live either. He whispered, "If you're still there, just give me peace." He didn't notice the figure standing behind the stained glass, watching. The figure who would make sure Ethan never left. When the church's caretaker arrived 3 hours later, the doors were still locked, from the inside. Ethan's car was in the lot, his phone on the pew, but Ethan, gone. And from that moment, St. Mercy wasn't just a church anymore. It became a crime scene. The irony? The man who reported him missing was Pastor Raymond Hale, the one person no one ever suspected. At least, not yet. The first night after Ethan's disappearance, the police came. They found no signs of struggle and only strange things. A chair knocked over, a single shoe under the confession booth, and a faint smell of candle wax mixed with something metallic. The locals began to talk. They said late at night, if you walked by the church, you could hear voices, not prayers and whispers. Low, trembling like someone begging. Detective Mira Lawson, assigned to the case, entered the church one night alone. Her flashlight trembled across the altar. She'd been in homicide for years, but something about this place made her knees lock. Then she heard it. A whisper, soft, broken. "Father, forgive me." She turned, no one was there. The next morning, she played back her recorder. There was a voice clear as day, a male voice whispering words she couldn't unhear. "I told him not to tell anyone." The timestamp? 2 hours after Ethan was last seen alive, and the voice? Matched the pastor, but Pastor Hale was a saint to the town. The kind who blessed newborns, led funerals, and fed the poor. The kind of man no one questions. That's why what happened next shook everyone's faith. Before he vanished, Ethan had gone to the church twice that week. Once to pray, and once to confront the pastor. He'd discovered something buried deep in the church records. A name that didn't belong. A donation from a person long dead. It wasn't just fraud. It was something darker. Ethan met Pastor Hale in the confession booth that final morning. He thought he was safe behind the wall, speaking to a man of God. But he didn't know that the booth wasn't built for forgiveness. It was built for secrets. Ethan's voice trembled as he confessed, "Father, I know about the old records. I know what you did with the donation money." Silence. Then came the pastor's voice, low, calm, like a storm before the thunder. "Some things, my son, are better left between me and God." Ethan never walked out of that booth, and that was the moment the line between faith and fear, prayer and punishment vanished forever. When the police finally opened the booth, it was empty. But there were bloodstains beneath the seat, and the smell of candle smoke still hung in the air, like the church itself refused to breathe. Every Sunday, the town gathered under the tall bell tower of St. Mercy Church. They listened to Pastor Raymond Hale speak about forgiveness, grace, and truth. He smiled when he talked about truth, the kind of gentle smile that made you feel safe. But behind that smile was rot. Detective Mira Lawson sat in the back pew that morning, watching him preach. She wasn't there for faith, she was there for answers. Ethan Cole's disappearance had turned into a dead end. No witnesses, no leads, no body, just that whispering voice on her recorder. She studied the pastor's hands as he held the Bible. Steady, calm, except when he turned the pages. His fingers trembled ever so slightly. Almost like guilt was pulsing through his veins. After the sermon, she approached him. "Mira, beautiful message, Pastor. You spoke about truth." Hale, smiling. "Truth always sets us free, Detective." "Mira, then you won't mind if I ask what truth you're hiding?" His smile didn't fade, but his eyes, they did something strange. They went cold, like glass. That night, Hale returned to the church alone. He stood before the altar whispering to himself, or maybe to someone unseen. His reflection in the glass cross stared back at him accusingly. "You said it was for God," he murmured. "You said he would understand." He wasn't talking to himself anymore. He was talking to the man he buried. In the flicker of the candlelight, Hale's smile cracked for the first time. And when it did, you could finally see the monster behind the priest's collar. 3 nights later, the church went dark. Power outage, the locals said, but Detective Mira saw it as her chance. She slipped inside through the side door, flashlight low, recorder running. Every step echoed like a heartbeat in a coffin. In the center of the church, she saw a single candle burning. And beside it, Pastor Hale, alone, kneeling, but he wasn't praying. He was preaching. Sin, he whispered, isn't always punished. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight. Sometimes God closes his eyes. So we don't have to. Mira froze. Her recorder captured every word. The voice that had haunted her nights, and it was his. The same tone. The same rhythm. Then she saw it on the altar under the candle, under a journal. Black leather, initials EC embossed faintly on the cover. Ethan Cole's diary. She reached for it, but the pastor's voice cut through the dark. Detective, you shouldn't be here. Her flashlight hit his face, half in shadow, half in gold glow. And for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Not of being caught, but of something worse. He stepped closer, whispering, "You think you're looking for justice. But all you'll find here is confession." Then the candle went out. A second later, something crashed behind her. She turned. Nothing. Just silence. When she flicked her light back toward the altar, Hale was gone. But the journal remained. And on the first page, in hurried handwriting, "If you find this, it's already too late." The following day, the church looked normal again, as if nothing had ever happened. But the moment Mira stepped inside, she knew the walls remembered everything. She opened Ethan's journal in the pew. The first entries were simple: prayers, reflections, notes about life. But halfway through, the tone shifted. The pastor isn't who he seems. He meets someone after midnight, always in the basement. Last night I followed the sound. I think he knows I saw him. Every line tightened the noose. Every word reeked of fear. Then in red ink, a final note. He said we all serve God differently, but what he did down there wasn't God's work. Mira went down to the basement that night. The air was damp, heavy. The walls lined with old statues, their eyes cracked and hollow. In the center, a single candle burned. And beside it, 2 shadows moved. One was hers. The other wasn't. She turned slowly, her heart pounding. The second shadow swayed, like someone was standing behind her. But when she spun around, the space was empty. Then she saw it, on the stone wall, scratched with trembling hands, "Forgive me, Father." And beneath it, a blood print. Mira knew in that moment, Ethan hadn't disappeared. He'd been buried here. But when she looked up, the candle flickered again, and the faint outline of a man in a priest's collar appeared in the reflection on the wall. 2 shadows. One truth, and a darkness that refused to die. 3 days after Mira found Ethan's journal, the town awoke to an unsettling sound. The church bells rang at 3 a.m. No one was inside. No one was supposed to be. By dawn, St. Mercy stood sealed, its wooden doors chained shut, its windows darkened from within. The town called it vandalism. Mira knew better. Someone was hiding something. She arrived at the scene with a warrant, but the lock wouldn't break. It was like the church itself refused entry. When they finally pried the door open, the air that escaped was thick and sour, a mix of incense and rot. The inside looked untouched, yet wrong. Every pew gleamed as if freshly polished, but the floor smelled faintly of bleach. There were new candles on the altar, hundreds of them, all unlit except one. The single flame burned in the center of the church, right where Ethan's candle once stood. Its wax ran red. Mira's steps echoed through the hall. The silence pressed against her like a weight. Then she noticed something. On the far wall near the confession booth, someone had painted a message. "Only God locks his house." The handwriting matched Ethan's. But how? Mira turned toward the booth, the very place Ethan was last seen, and the doors creaked open on their own. Inside, the seat was gone. Instead, there was a trapdoor, old, wooden, nearly invisible under the shadow of the cross. Her pulse quickened. She opened it. The air that rose up was cold and wet, smelling of dirt and metal. A staircase led down into the dark, and carved on the wall, right above it, "Enter only if you're ready to lose your faith." The church doors slammed shut behind her. For the first time, Mira realized she wasn't investigating a disappearance anymore. She was walking straight into the pastor's confession. The basement beneath St. Mercy was nothing like she imagined. No stone walls or ancient relics, just a small room lit by a single hanging bulb. And on the table, a Bible. It was open, its pages warped and stained with something dark. Not ink, blood. Mira reached for it carefully. The first few pages were blank, but in the middle, entire passages were rewritten. Not scripture, but letters. Messages. Desperate, trembling handwriting that screamed through every line. I tried to tell him the truth. He said God chose him to cleanse the sinners. He made me kneel and pray before it happened. Ethan's handwriting. She turned another page and froze. There, pressed between the verses, was a photograph. Ethan, smiling beside Pastor Hale, both standing in front of the church door. On the back, written in ink, "For Father Raymond, my mentor and friend." The realization hit her like a blow. Ethan wasn't just a parishioner. He was the pastor's apprentice, his student. That meant this wasn't just murder. It was betrayal in its purest form. Suddenly she heard footsteps above, slow, deliberate, circling the altar. The old floorboards creaked like whispers in a prayer. Mira looked up. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then a faint voice. The same whisper she'd heard in her first recording. He wanted to save me. So he killed me. The Bible slipped from her hands. Blood smeared across her gloves. And in that moment she realized Ethan wasn't haunting this place. He was begging her to finish what he couldn't. Detective Mira Lawson wasn't religious. But that night, as she climbed the basement steps, every verse, every hymn she'd ever heard started replaying in her mind like a curse. At the top, the church was completely dark. No power, no wind. Just the faint creak of wood and breathing. Someone else was there. She moved her flashlight slowly, sweeping across the pews. That's when she saw him, Pastor Hale, standing behind the altar. His white collar was gone, his sleeves rolled up, and his hands red. Mira, it's over, Pastor. Hale, smiling faintly. Over? No, Detective. This is where faith begins. He raised his hands toward the cross. Do you know why God allows pain, Mira? Because pain is proof he's still watching. Mira's voice cracked. You killed him. Why? He lost faith. He mocked the sacred. He wanted to reveal what he couldn't understand. I didn't kill him out of hate. I saved him from himself. His tone was eerily calm, almost tender. He begged me to stop, Mira said. Yes, Hale whispered. And in that moment, he finally prayed with his heart. The candlelight flickered, casting two silhouettes on the wall, hers and his. For a brief moment, they merged, one shadow swallowing the other. Mira raised her gun. You call this faith? No, he smiled. I call it forgiveness. A loud crack echoed, and not from the gun, but from the ceiling. The cross above them snapped, crashing to the floor, splitting in two. Hale fell to his knees, whispering something she could barely hear. He's here. And then, silence. The only sound left was the soft burning of the last candle. And the words Ethan had written in his journal replayed in her head. He said we all serve God differently. That night, Mira walked out of St. Mercy Church for the last time. But as she passed the gate, the church bell rang once. Just once. No one was inside. After the night at St. Mercy, Pastor Hale was taken into custody. No body, no weapon, no clear proof. Only a blood-stained Bible, a missing man, and a detective who couldn't sleep. The town stood divided. Half believed the pastor was framed. Half whispered that the devil wore his face. Detective Mira Lawson couldn't stop replaying his words. He lost faith. I saved him. That single sentence led her back to the church archives, and what she found there shattered every illusion of holiness. Records from 20 years ago. Names of orphaned boys under the church's care. Each file marked spiritually guided, but many of those boys were never adopted. Never heard from again, and the signature on every file, Raymond Hale. He wasn't just a pastor. He was a man who'd lived two lives, one in the light, one buried in darkness. Further digging revealed an old police report, a missing child from 1999. Last seen with a kind churchman named Father Hale. Case dismissed. No evidence. Mira felt the air drain from her lungs. The story wasn't about Ethan alone. It was about a pattern, a lifetime of sins hidden under sermons. She visited Hale in his cell the next morning. "Mira, how long have you been doing this?" Hale, smiling softly. "You think I enjoyed it?" "Mira, you killed children." "You killed Ethan." Hale. "No, I freed them. I gave them peace before the world destroyed them." His voice cracked, for the first time not from guilt but from belief. He wasn't pretending. He truly thought he was saving souls. "The church gave me broken ones," he whispered. "I just sent them home early." Mira left the cell with trembling hands. She finally understood what kind of monster she was dealing with. Not a killer driven by rage, but by faith twisted into madness, and that kind of evil doesn't die easily. The confession booth had been sealed by police tape, but Mira couldn't shake the thought that the truth, the real truth, was still inside. Late one night, she returned, alone. The air was thick with dust and candle smoke, as if time itself refused to move there. She sat inside the booth, where Ethan had taken his last breath. Closed her eyes, listened, silence, then faintly, a whisper. Not from outside. From within the wall, she pressed her ear against the wood. There was space behind it. Hollow, using a crowbar, she pried open the back panel, and there it was. A hidden compartment filled with letters, each one addressed to Father Raymond. Each written by different people, all confessions. All marked "Do not open," but they were opened. Every single one, and on the back of some, written in Hale's shaky handwriting, "Weakness cured. Temptation ended. Forgiven." Mira's stomach turned. These weren't just confessions, and they were targets. Every person who wrote to him, every sinner seeking peace, had vanished in the years that followed. Among the letters was one more recent, Ethan's, dated the day before he died. "Father, I found the truth. You told me to have faith, but faith doesn't lie. I can't stay silent anymore." That was his last confession. Mira stepped out of the booth, trembling. Her flashlight hit the far wall, and she froze. The wallpaper peeled slightly, revealing something written beneath it. It wasn't paint. It was blood. "He forgave me too." That night the church seemed to breathe. The pews creaked. And as Mira turned to leave, a whisper echoed through the booth once more. "Your turn, detective." The trial of Pastor Hale began on a cold, rain-soaked morning. The courtroom was silent as he entered. Calm, composed, Bible in hand. Mira sat behind the prosecutor, eyes locked on him. For weeks she'd studied the evidence, the letters, the names, but none of it prepared her for what happened next. When asked if he wished to make a statement, Hale smiled and stood. "I have only one confession," he said softly. "I never killed anyone. I simply helped them reach God faster." A ripple of disbelief filled the room. He turned to face Mira. "Detective Lawson," he said, "you don't believe in God, do you? That's why you'll never understand what mercy truly means." She rose, trembling. "You don't speak for mercy. You speak for monsters." "And yet," he replied, "we both dig up graves to find truth." The judge called for order, but just as he spoke, the lights flickered. A thunderclap rattled the building. Moments later, the news came over police radio. St. Mercy Church was on fire. Every stained glass window glowed red. The bell tower collapsed under its own weight, and right before the roof fell, witnesses claimed they saw the large wooden cross, and the same one that hung over Hale's sermons, crash to the floor. No one lit the fire. No accelerant. No short circuit. It was as if the church burned itself. When Mira arrived at the scene, ash floated like snow. Through the smoke, she saw it. The cross blackened and split in half. And beneath it, a skeleton hand clutching a rusted rosary. DNA confirmed it weeks later. Ethan Cole. The case was closed, but every night since, Mira wakes to the sound of church bells, ringing only once, faint and distant. And each time she remembers the last thing Hale said before the verdict. The fire wasn't punishment, detective. It was absolution. When the fire at St. Mercy finally died, the whole town gathered in silence. Ash still drifted through the morning air, sticking to the blackened stone like memories that refused to fade. Detective Mira Lawson stepped inside what was left of the church, boots sinking in soot, heart heavy. The altar had survived barely, Its marble cracked down the middle, and between the fractures lay streaks of dried rust-brown stains. She knew what they were, even before the lab confirmed it. Blood. Ethan Cole's blood. But there was something else. A pattern. When she stood above it, she realized the stains weren't random. They formed the shape of a cross. Not the holy one. An upside-down one. Suddenly the silence broke. The sound of wind dragging a hymn sheet across the floor. It stopped at her feet. Burned, torn, but the words still visible. Through mercy we are cleansed, through pain we are reborn. Hale had quoted that line in every sermon. Now it read like a confession written in someone else's blood. Mira's throat tightened. She knelt beside the altar and touched the cracked marble. For a second she thought she heard something, like a faint heartbeat in the stone. Maybe it was imagination, or maybe this place still remembered every scream. When she left the ruins, she didn't look back. But the camera crews caught her face ash-streaked with tears. And that image, the detective leaving the altar that bled, became the front-page photo that reopened a nation's debate on faith. Trust and evil hiding behind a collar. St. Mercy was gone, but its secrets weren't buried deep enough. Weeks passed. The trial ended. Hale was found guilty on multiple counts tied to historic disappearances. But one question haunted everyone. If God was watching, why didn't he stop it? Mira didn't have an answer. She visited the prison once more, not for evidence, but for closure. He sat behind glass, calm as ever. A small Bible rested on the table in front of him, untouched since sentencing. Mira, you watched them suffer. You think that's mercy? Hale, I didn't watch, he did. I only obeyed. His words crawled under her skin. Hale, you think you solved it, detective. But you never asked who chose me. Someone did. Someone higher. She wanted to dismiss it as delusion, until she saw a file slide across the table, inside a photo of another priest. Another church. Another town. Stamped active investigation confidential. Hale smiled, soft, almost fatherly. St. Mercy wasn't the first altar to taste blood. Guards pulled him away, but his voice lingered. He's still watching, and so am I. That night, Mira sat alone in her car outside the prison. Rain hit the windshield like ticking clocks. For the first time, she prayed. Not for Hale, not even for Ethan, but for the silence to stop. When lightning flashed, she caught her reflection in the glass. Behind her own image, a second shadow flickered, wearing a priest's collar. Months later, demolition crews arrived to clear what remained of St. Mercy. But the first shovel struck something solid under the altar foundation. A coffin. Inside weren't bones, but boxes, files, dozens of them. Each labeled with a name, each containing letters, photographs, and donation receipts. The church council tried to confiscate them immediately, citing internal matters. But Mira was already there, warrant in hand. When she opened the first box, she found letters dating back 40 years. Different pastors, different victims. A pattern of silence passed from one holy man to the next. The truth was bigger than Hale. The entire institution had buried it. Literally. She took the evidence to the media. The story broke worldwide. Headlines screamed, "Faith under fire." Church officials resigned. Investigations reopened. But that night, when Mira returned home, she found a small envelope slipped under her door. No address. No sender. Inside was a single photograph. St. Mercy before the fire. Bells shining under sunrise. On the back, written in perfect handwriting, "You dug up graves, detective. Some of us prefer them closed." The handwriting was Hale's, except he'd been found dead in his cell that morning. Mira stared at the photo until the lights in her apartment flickered. The city outside went quiet, and from somewhere distant, so faint she almost doubted it, came the sound of one bell. Just once. It had been 6 months since the St. Mercy fire. The headlines had faded, the ashes swept away, the world moved on. But Detective Mira Lawson hadn't. Every night she woke at 3 a.m., the exact time the church bells had rung that final night. The sound wasn't real anymore, but her mind refused to let it die. The rhythm echoed inside her like a heartbeat she couldn't silence. She tried to pray once. She sat at her desk, hands clasped, whispering words she barely remembered from childhood. But the words felt heavy, empty, like she was talking to someone who had stopped listening long ago. The case had taken more than her sleep. It had taken her faith. She didn't believe in God anymore. But worse, she couldn't stop feeling like he still believed in her, watching, waiting. One evening, she returned to the evidence room, unable to explain why. Boxes from the St. Mercy case were sealed and labeled, ready for archiving. But as she opened the final folder, something fell out. A photograph. A young boy, no older than 10, smiling in front of the church. On the back, a name she didn't recognize, Samuel Cole. Ethan had never mentioned a brother. Her heart pounded. She looked through the rest of the file, and there it was, a police report from 15 years earlier. Missing child, presumed runaway. Last seen at St. Mercy Church, Samuel Cole. Mira's throat tightened. The truth hit her like a flood. Ethan hadn't come to the church to pray that morning. He'd come searching for his brother, and instead he'd met the same fate. That night she sat alone in her apartment. The city was quiet, too quiet. She looked out the window and swore she saw it again. The faint glow of a candle burning in the church ruins. She whispered into the dark, voice trembling. "If you're still watching." Stop, no answer came, just silence. And the echo of bells that never stopped ringing in her head. A year later, they reopened St. Mercy's grounds, not as a church, but as a memorial site. Rows of candles, names carved in marble, flowers laid for victims whose faces the world had forgotten. Mira stood at the back of the crowd, coat collar pulled high, watching the new pastor step to the microphone. He was young, soft-spoken, voice trembling as he spoke. "Today we remember not the sins of one man, but the silence that let them grow." The crowd bowed their heads, but as the pastor continued, Mira noticed something odd. His notes. Every few seconds, he flipped to a page of an old, scorched Bible. When he turned one particular page, the paper caught the light just enough for Mira to see. Faint markings, barely legible in the same handwriting she'd seen before. Hale's handwriting. She froze. Was it possible? The Bible had been taken as evidence, burned in the fire. But this one survived. Her pulse quickened. She pushed through the crowd, but the young pastor smiled as she approached. Calm, knowing. "Detective Lawson," he said softly before she could speak. "He told me you'd come. The world fell away." "Who told you?" she whispered. "The man who built this place," he said. "He said you'd never stop listening for the bells." She stared, trembling. "That Bible, where did you get it?" He smiled faintly. "It was left at my door, no note. Just a message written inside." He opened the book. On the first page, in faded ink, "Forgive her, for she cannot forget." Mira's breath caught. The candlelight flickered, and for a brief second, she thought she saw a figure standing in the back of the chapel. Tall, familiar, hands clasped behind his back. But when she blinked, it was gone. That night, she dreamed of St. Mercy again, whole. Unburned, bells ringing, people praying, but the pews were empty. Only one voice echoed through the church. Hale's. "I told you, Detective. Faith doesn't end with fire. It's been 5 years. The world forgot the name St. Mercy, but Mira never did. She retired from the force. Moved to a small town far away. Bought a quiet house with a broken porch light and no church in sight. She tells herself she's free. But every year, on the anniversary of the fire, she still wakes up at midnight, waiting for the bells. They never come. One evening, while unpacking an old box of files, she found Ethan's journal again, the edges torn, pages faintly burned. But there was something new, a page that hadn't been there before. She frowned, running her fingers over it. The handwriting was unmistakable, hers, but she'd never written it. "You didn't stop it. You only passed it on." Her stomach turned cold. She looked out the window, a church steeple in the distance, newly built. The bell at its top gleamed in the fading light. She could have sworn she moved here because there wasn't one. Her phone rang. No number, just static. Then faintly, a voice. "Detective Lawson?" She froze. Ethan's voice, clear, calm. "He's here again." The line went dead. Mira dropped the phone, staring at the church through the window. The bell began to sway, but no sound came out, just a flash of light. like a single candle reigniting somewhere deep inside. And for the first time in years, Mira smiled. Because silence, she realized, can be louder than any prayer. The bells never rang again. But St. Mercy never died. 3 months after Mira moved, an anonymous email appeared in her inbox. No subject, no sender, just a single attachment. A video file named Mercy Confession MP4. She hesitated, then pressed play. Static filled the screen. Then at the inside of a church. Not the old St. Mercy, but one that looked eerily similar. A man sat in the confession booth, camera angled just enough to show his trembling hands. "Forgive me, Father," he said, voice low and cracking. "For I have sinned." Mira froze. That voice, she knew it. Pastor Hale. The footage was old, distorted, but his face was unmistakable. He looked older, gaunter, haunted by something that was eating him alive. "I tried to bury it," he whispered. "The boy, the truth, the money, but you can't bury sin in holy ground." He looked directly into the camera. "They'll come looking. They always do. Tell them it wasn't about faith. It was about fear." Then a flicker. The camera shook violently and the frame blurred to black. But just before it cut out, a reflection appeared behind him. A shadow in the booth. Another man, Ethan. Mira's heart stopped. The timestamp on the file, 2 days after the fire. It couldn't be. Hale was already dead unless... The message wasn't for forgiveness. It was a warning. Mira sat there in silence as the video ended, staring at her own reflection on the screen. For the first time, she understood what he meant. St. Mercy wasn't haunted by the dead. It was haunted by the truth no one wanted to hear. Mira returned to the ruins one last time. The city had rebuilt around it, glass towers, new roads. But the lot where St. Mercy once stood was still empty, untouched, as if even time refused to enter. She lit a single candle and set it on the cracked altar stone. The flame shivered in the wind but didn't die. "You wanted forgiveness," she whispered. "But forgiveness isn't yours to take." Her voice trembled. "I've spent years chasing ghosts. Maybe I became one." She knelt, pressing her hand to the cold marble. The ground beneath her seemed to hum, faintly like a heartbeat buried deep underground. A whisper rose with the wind. "Mira," her breath caught. Ethan's voice again, soft, calm, no longer afraid. "It's over now." She closed her eyes. For the first time, she didn't fight the silence. The bells didn't ring. The whispers didn't follow. Only peace, unfragile, fleeting, real. She smiled faintly. "Forgive me, Father," she said, voice barely a whisper. "For I have killed, not a man, but the faith that blinded me." The candle's flame flickered, then went out. And in that darkness, Mira finally understood. St. Mercy wasn't cursed. It was a mirror, showing everyone what they feared to confess. The case never reopened. The files stayed sealed. But sometimes, late at night, travelers passing by that empty lot say they see a faint light glowing. One candle, still burning, and if you listen closely, you might hear a voice say, "Faith doesn't end with fire.